Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and a tabletop role-playing aficionado. In this D&D review, I'm going to take a look at Dragon Delves, the new anthology adventure book from Wizards of the Coast, designed for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, 2024 edition, and available on Roll20. An early review copy has been provided for the purposes of this review, and if you enjoy these kind of reviews and watching fun weekly live plays and other D&D content, you can support my channel at patreon.com/roguewatson. Note that this review will be spoilery, so if you are planning on actually playing in any of these adventures, this is going to spoil some of that content. Also note, in case you're new around here, with these anthology official releases, I do 2 videos. This one is going to be just the overall review and my thoughts about how it all comes together and whether or not it's worth the purchase. And then my second video is going to rank each individual adventure and do a deeper dive into all 10 adventures. And because there are 10 adventures, I'm not going to go through all of them in this review video. All right, so Dragon Delves, in case you are, for some reason, are not super familiar with what this release is, this is an anthology book that's all about dragons, and it is our first official adventure release post D&D 2024, which released in the fall of 2024, and I believe the first book we've had since Quests from the Infinite Staircase, I think, which was also an anthology, but that one was, modernizing classic adventures. This is all original adventure content, each one modeled after a different chromatic or metallic dragon. See if I can run through them real quick. We've got red, blue, black, white, green, and then gold, silver, brass, bronze, copper. Boom. I should do it because I literally just have gone through all of these adventures. So each adventure module, it covers a different one of those dragons, and it covers from levels 1 through 12. So unfortunately, if you are hoping to be able to legitimately battle like ancient versions of the dragons, sorry, take it up with Wizards of the Coast, because they don't ever want to cover anything beyond like level 12, and that I could go off on rants, which I have done about higher level D&D play. I guess we did just get Vecna Eve of Ruin like a year ago, which did do high level stuff, but this one is back to the usual 1 through 12 level range. All right, so what do we get with Dragon Delves? What you get is a overall module that you can just create and have everything available in your. And by the way, I'm reviewing it. Obviously, the title of this is a Roll20 review. This is specifically the Roll20 version available on Roll20.net that I'll be looking at, because I use Roll20 for all my stuff. So we get 10 adventures. Now you can have these created as a module, which means you'll have everything available, which is what you're going to see in my version because it's everything. Or you can have them as individual add-ons, which is great, and that's how they should do all of the anthologies, because that's how most of us use this content, right? We're not probably going to run this as a full campaign necessarily. Instead, we're going to pick out the couple of the adventures that we like the most, or the ones that can just fit within our location or theme, whatever we got going on. So we only need to add those individual add-ons. So you can easily, once you purchase this whole thing together, which unfortunately you have to purchase all in bulk, then you can add the individual add-ons to whatever adventure you're running. And it's very easy to do that in Roll20. But for the purposes of for this review, I'll be covering obviously the entire thing as one big book. So in total, the module includes 19 battle maps, of which almost all of them are the appropriate scale, which is something that I have struggled with, and a lot of you all have struggled with in the past with earlier D&D 5e releases, especially with all these different level scaling problems we've had with the battle grid maps. But this is not the case. So they've figured that shit out, and now everything is scaled appropriately. There is a single one, the very last one, I believe, that's a 10-foot map that has been subdivided into the 5-foot grids, and then there's a few overland maps as well, I believe. Let's see, there's 19 battle maps, and then 2 regional maps that are basically not designed to be used as battle maps. Obviously, they just kind of show an overall area. It also includes around 100, I believe, when I counted them up, generic monster tokens / character sheets, plus the character art pack, which is going to include basically all the tokens that are included here. In fact, I can pull up the token page, because one thing I was really impressed with, this is the first, as I mentioned, release that is the post 2024 which means we get we get the more advanced character sheets, which look a lot different than the older ones. You can see here in Roll20, they look very, very fancy. And then the token art is especially impressive to me as somebody who's used a lot of tokens, over the years, and that's how we generally play all our games. I just love the way that a lot of the tokens really seem to pop out of the token. Look at this frost giant. Is especially cool the way it's designed, and just feels very like dynamic and three-dimensional and stuff. Not all of them necessarily do that, but most of them tend to have this really cool effect with the token art. And the token art, I mean, the artwork just looks really good in general, despite there being a big difference in art, which I'm going to get to in a second. There's also over 50 player art handouts. These are basically just all pictures that are throughout the book that are just included as art pieces that you can show to your players. That 50 number, by the way, doesn't even include every single creature and NPC. That also has artwork that you can show off. That's also included in this module. These are just extra, usually of like scenes of various adventures, depicting maybe some of the cool named dragons and their situations and things. So the artwork. This is a big part of this book. If Fizban's Guide to Dragons, whatever the hell it was called, Treasury of Dragons something, was all about the dragon lore and like mechanics and the treasury and stuff, which by the way is a perfect companion piece to this one. So much so that I'm worried this one didn't include enough dragon information for its dragon book, because I guess they all included it in Fizban's. This one is more of just a celebration of the artwork, which is depicted mostly via Roll20 in one page for every single dragon. So that one that you saw, which there's no real like introductory splash page, by the way, which is I was looking at that. We do get a tips page, which is really nice. This has become standard for the last couple of years, which kind of shows off how basically to use a lot of the different quirks in Roll20, including how the lighting layer works, how you can ping players to different areas, if you want to use the fog of war, or how to change individual players to different maps, all that kind of stuff. It doesn't include the really fancy map that tests dynamic lighting. I don't know why it didn't include that one, because usually these do include like its own map for that. And it also doesn't have its own splash page, even though you can see clearly, there are pictures we could have used for just a generic splash page to throw all the players, on there while it's loading in case we want to run this as a campaign. We don't have that. What we do have is one little cool art piece, and it's really a celebration of dragon illustrations and artwork throughout the decades of D&D, which is kind of nice because Dragon Delves is in itself a celebration of all the different dragons, and it's supposed to be, it kind of plays it safe, I guess, when it comes to like, hey, how do we go back to, I don't know, our roots, or celebrate, original Dungeons and Dragons stuff. Well, dragons are pretty famous for that, and then we can have all this fun like old school monster art in there from the 70s and 80s, and then just throughout the different editions and all the different kind of art styles and stuff, and goes over like just cool concept art stuff. So there's neat things like this for the Magic Gathering card, a neat thing like this for every single one of the dragons, and it's on the map layer, which means you could technically throw your players on here and everybody can enjoy, I guess, having that to experience together. But I don't know, it's really for the DM, I guess. I don't think these are actually included as actual artwork that you can just show to your players. I think you'd have to use it as a map layer, but it is pretty cool. On the flip side, there are different art styles also for there's 10 different illustrators and 7 different cartographers. So we're getting everything, right? We're getting all the different kind of map styles, all the different map artists that have basically been doing D&D art over the years, for better and for worse, in my frank opinion, because there's a lot of art styles that I really like and I think look great on a virtual tabletop, and some that do not look good at all. So on the positive, you're not saddled with the one that you hate. On the negative, some of them are probably going to have art styles that you're just not going to maybe like as much. Or maybe you're more forgiving than I am when it comes to that kind of thing. But that is, I mean, it's kind of a positive and negative, but that's the point of the book, is they really wanted to use a different art style for every single one of them. I mean, for example, some of them are very like cartoony looking and meant to look like a children's book. Others are supposed to look like, very like old school, original, first edition D&D with just, black and white art and stuff, which looks cool when it comes to like, see if I can get an example of this one. Yeah, like the actual just artwork that's depicted, but less cool to me when it comes to the actual battle maps that we're on. And then others look like just amazing. You know, you've got like your Mike Schley maps and all that stuff, which look absolutely fantastic on the virtual tabletop. So basically, you'll just get a mix of all of that stuff. It also includes about 50 magic items, most of which are obviously from the Player's Handbook or the Dungeon Master's Guide. I believe the Horde magic items. So I never actually reviewed Fizzbands, sorry. But I looked it up, and this one just includes Horde magic items, which are directly from Fizzband. So it doesn't actually add any new ones, which again makes this really a companion adventure book to Fizzband, which Fizzbands goes over all the different dragon lore, and it goes over like how their like hordes actually dictate like how they advance from like, you know, wormling to young to adult and so on. And there's this neat magic item system where you can find the lowest level, the wormling dragons have like slumbering versions of magic items, and then if they're steeped in the horde of a next higher tier dragon, you can actually upgrade that item into its next rank, basically, and the same item will then gain new effects. So this is a really neat idea. We've seen this before in a lot of different, you know, obviously RPGs in general, but D&D has kind of played around with this as well, as the concept of like upgrading magic items. And I think players really enjoy that too, because they tend to have their like signature stuff that they really like to use. And you know, this way it's the same attunement slot, for example, and you can just upgrade it. And it also works towards one of the ways that the adventures are all tied together via a campaign as well, is by having these items and just want to go around and instead of gotta catch them all, it's gotta upgrade all of our items by having to go interact with dragons. And if you happen to slay that, normally it takes like I think like a year for you to stick the magic item in there and have it get upgraded. But if you slay the dragon, then it upgrades like over an 8-hour long rest, so you can get your good magic items that way. If you really want to turn it into like a video gamey thing of like, hey, let's just do all these quests to upgrade our items. Another thing the adventure does, which I think is new. I have to find where that section is, but some of these, there it is. Some of these adventures can be run for a solo player. Each of these adventures includes instructions for ensuring the character faces an appropriate challenge, and they have to use the Blessing of the Lone Champion gift, which is basically a super buff for the one hero. So there are 3 of them, and they range from low level to high level that you can play. They're definitely more RP and exploration focused than they are combat focused, which is probably how you want to do it for a solo player. It's not something that I'm particularly interested in doing. Maybe it's something I should explore, but we'll get to, I guess, the ruling on the buff, because frankly I wasn't terribly impressed with how they do that, and I would have preferred if they had done kind of like the sidekick system and made it a little more like you're a solo player, but you've got like, I don't know, like generic sidekicks that the player can still control, almost like you're playing, kind of a tactical game, I guess, with, like Baldur's Gate. Like if you're playing Baldur's Gate solo, you control the party, right? I wouldn't expect in D&D for one person necessarily control a party of players and roleplay all of them, but I think the sidekick system, which was introduced in, oh my gosh, maybe Tasha's or something, where you have like generic, stat block creature basically that are under your control, I think that would have worked a little bit better. I do like the way that the book is organized, especially on Roll20. So for example, with Death at Sunset, every single adventure includes the key plot points in like, just bullet point, like boom, boom, boom. Here's what this adventure is about. Here's what the players do. And here's how the thing progresses. And, by adventures, these are all pretty... Well, they are self-contained, obviously, and they all are essentially one location. So they're really more like elaborate layers to an extent. Some of them are a little more expansive than that. In fact, that Forbidden Vale one we looked at is definitely a larger one. But 90% of them basically is like, hey, here's the dragon's lair, basically, and then we need to explore this area. So it's a dungeon crawl, essentially. But there can be, plot points and things that develop in there. But it's usually 2 or 3 things. And then it goes over like a step-by-step process of like, hey, here's what you need to know to run this adventure, which is obviously read the adventure background section, that lists all the key NPCs that are important, including where their locations are, which is awesome, what stat blocks they use, what their role is, as well as any other information the party needs to know. For example, if it's the White Dragon's lair, they need to look up the extreme cold rules because that's in effect throughout that layer, and then all the stat blocks that are relevant in just like, again, a boom, boom, boom format. This is awesome, and I don't think I've seen this in the other anthologies that at least did this in such a nice, like, just organizing way at a glance, and it really is helpful to see how all these different ones come together, and it really helps me also, not only just reviewing it, but seeing, I mean, you could see how monster heavy this one, the Forbidden Veil one, is, for example, with all the different stat blocks the player needs to know. Some of them might have very few NPCs, like this one, for example. There's very few of them, and others are going to be much more story heavy. Let's look at this one, Cover for Song. And you can see just absolutely like over a dozen different NPCs to chat to. So that also gives you an idea of the kind of themes. In fact, if it had maybe overall like themes, even, I mean, there's even some more they could have done, but I still, like, you know, just list like one words like, hey, this is a whatever haunted mansion or something. But this does a great job, I think, honestly. And then for further organization help, that Roll20 did, which I also have not seen them do before. And I went back and looked at Quest for the Infinite Staircase, which was the last anthology module, and it was not done there, which is that the creatures in the journal, the named creatures, at least the important ones that are like bespoke to just that specific module, are actually organized by module, which is fantastic. So all of the named creatures are going to be found under their own little subfolder here under named NPCs. Again, this is the first time I've seen this, but I'm gonna point it out because it's awesome, and I definitely want to see that going forward, where you can tell that all the important creatures are organized that way. Because otherwise, it would be kind of just a one big, which is how it usually is. It's just one big tab under named NPCs that has everything from all the different modules. So that is amazingly cool, and I love seeing that. And then it's the same thing for the token page that we just looked at earlier, that actually has them organized by the different adventure modules as well. So that was a huge help, and you can see them all very clearly. You know, you can grab whatever you need from those different adventures. In terms of the dragons that we face, I just thought this was a fun stat to write down. 3 of them, and again, level 1 through 12, 3 of them are wormlings, 3 of them are young dragons, and then 4 of them are adults. Technically, one of them is an ancient dragon, but you do something, and I don't think you can not do it. I think it's pretty much a triggered thing that happens. As long as you bring the item that you're supposed to bring, then you depower the ancient dragon into an adult dragon, because no level 12 should be fighting an ancient dragon, frankly. So we don't ever get to really fight an ancient dragon legitimately, because we're just not going to be that kind of level yet. And then in terms of how it comes together as a campaign, that's always a big question for these anthology modules, right? And it's not necessarily what they're designed for, which is using these as, you know, individual adventures. And in fact, the book even says, hey, you can use them as one-shots, or you can use them, drop them into your ongoing campaign, which is what you should be using them for, basically, if you need to use them. And, you know, your characters are traveling from one thing to another, and here's the different locations that you could possibly use, which there is a decent variety of locations. Although one of my complaints, I think, is that a lot of the adventures are basically just dragons in their lair, and you gotta go and you gotta kill, or sometimes talk to the dragon. I think there could have been so much more done with that, and there's like 2 of them I feel like that do a great job of turning that on its head. But most of them are just dragons in lairs, basically. But there are some options for creating a campaign, and I will say that I think this one does one of the better jobs of linking its campaign story together, which is a low bar because they haven't done a very good job so far of linking them together as a campaign. This one gives you 3 options. Option 1 basically just says, hey, just give them a mysterious patron who works for Bahamut, which is the dragon, the good dragon god, the antithesis of Tiamat, who is also, I believe, Fizban in the Dragonlance universe, or is that also forgotten? Or is Fizban just kind of a multiversal dude? Anyway, and you're not necessarily working for Bahamut directly. I guess you are, but you're working for like a agent of Bahamut, and you're just doing all this dragon stuff, and you're just being you're given a bunch of missions to go have stuff to do with dragons. That's it. So it's not very impressive. Option 2 is the one I really like and was impressed by, which is that the inciting incident for the very last adventure, Dragons of the Sandstone City, involves being given an egg, a dragon egg, that appears to be inert. But then when you approach the final boss, the dragon egg has a power that it specifically like depowers the final boss, which is the rival dragon, and actually buffs the players also in a very classic, like, oh, we've got to buff the players to take on this big threat. Although, whatever, level 12 can fight an adult dragon, even after a dungeon crawl. So the campaign says start with that inciting incident, have the NPC give the players this egg, and then says that the egg must be, what does it say, steeped in the hordes of 10 dragons, one of each chromatic and metallic kind, to activate its power, and that the egg will lead the character towards suitable hordes. So your quest is literally to seek out one of each dragon. Now, it's kind of up to the DM to figure out how to actually give them all these adventures, but these do give them adventures that are one of each dragon, and it links together an overarching campaign because you're like checking them off a list where you're steeping them in the horde of each of these dragons. And again, you end up, I think, although there's one of them that, I don't know if that actually counts as their horde or not, but I guess it's the silver dragon. You don't actually ever like have a silver dragon in the thing, or maybe, and the gold dragon also. Those are, I don't know, campaign. We might have to come up with some hordes for some of them, because not all of them you end up with their hordes, but maybe it's, you just need to like touch the, I don't know. You make sure the DM would know that that's a thing. But anyway, and I think that's actually a cool way of linking it together. It gives the party an excuse to like meet all these dragons, power up their thing. Obviously you'd want to create the villain of the big bad. It's a blue dragon of the Sandstone City adventure, and make that an ongoing villain and maybe a problem for the party, so that by the time they get there, they really need to take this guy down, because he's got an actual plan to resurrect other ancient blue dragons and just be a horrifying force. And the third option is kind of the one I teased, which is about the magic items, which is like, hey, if your players are just more into the hack and slash thing, make sure to introduce the horde magic items and have them find the horde items in each of the first 3 leveled adventures, and then they want to go around and basically upgrade all their stuff by making sure they hit up other dragons. You could combine both of these, option 2 and 3, by the way, with the first one, and have them have a patron who knows like where all these dragon related adventures are, or you could just run this concurrently with your other campaigns, and it's just that, in the back of their head, they're like, oh yeah, we definitely do want to take on these dragon adventures, because those have extra relevance to getting stronger, I guess. And interestingly, if you do run it as a campaign, it doesn't quite follow the like 1 per level thing. I mean, you already know it doesn't, right? Because it's 10 adventures and it goes to level 1 through 12. There's a weird bit where like the first one is designed for both level 1 and 2, and they're supposed to level up, because you can't do anything level 1 basically. So you're supposed to level up like halfway through that adventure. But then there's no like level, I think there's no level 6 adventure, no level 8 adventure, and then there's like 2 for level 12. So it has a weird like leveling scale. Now, some of the leveling scaling, it wouldn't really matter too much, I guess. You want to keep tier 1 to tier 1 and all that, but it's just kind of a weird quirk where like, well, wait, there is no level 6 adventure, so are we designed to like play something else, or how do we, do that in terms of the campaign? And it didn't really offer any solutions to the leveling thing there. So in terms of going over, I don't want to sit here and dive deep into all of these adventures. That's what my other video is going to be for. But what I will do is showcase like 2 or 3 of them, so you get an idea of kind of what we're up against, I guess. But I will say that most of them are basically dragons in layers. And it even says with dragon delves, dragons in dungeons is the first one. It says, nothing is more quintessentially Dungeons and Dragons than gathering a group of heroes to face a mighty dragon in a mysterious dungeon. Which, granted, there was a funny running joke throughout 5e where like there wasn't a whole lot of dragons in those adventures, and this one gives you plenty of that. Unfortunately, I do think there's a little too much of dragons in dungeons. So maybe I have a problem with the like premise itself, but it gets a little repetitive when you're like, okay, and then this is another dragon in a dungeon thing. I just think dragons can be so much more than that. And like I said, there are like 2 of them or so that really show off like, oh, you could really do some crazy stuff that just happened to feature a dragon, instead of just having the, oh yeah, this is another cave dungeon system, whatever, that has a deadly dragon to take out. So speaking of that, we're going to talk about Death at Sunset, which is the level 1/2 adventure, and I think it's definitely one of the better ones. I really enjoy this one. Just obviously amazing, full color, kind of a painting looking art style as well. This one features elves living in a village. Weirdly, like 2 of the adventures have this whole like or maybe 2 or 3 of them have this weird like tie together with Githyanki for some reason. I think this might be one of them. Maybe it's just elves in general. And this one features a big, cool, like redwood giant tree grove that was ruled by an ancient green dragon who was terrible and corrupted everything. And then a bunch of adventurers, the elves, went and killed her. And then it's been fine since then, but now bad things are happening again, and they've been sending people out to investigate. The people haven't come back. So that's where the players come in, and they need to go investigate what's going on. And it turns out that there is basically a descendant of that green dragon, which was called Death at Sunset, that the elves named it, which is a cool name. And then the descendant, which is now a wormling, is called Sunset is Nigh, which is also very cool. I feel like all the dragons should be named like this, like the Argonians from Elder Scrolls, I think. And the players at level 1, they're told to explore this region and gather stuff for like antidotes, which is useful for all the poison being used here. So there's a neat little kind of dungeon. Not technically not a dungeon crawl, but it's a map with a bunch of enemies on it. And I like the fact that the green dragon is actually very manipulative, which is something that is true of green dragons, and has basically forced the elves to kind of, or at least one elf is now like guarding its lair, for example. So there's a neat bit where you can have like kind of a social moment there. There's some zombies you can fight, some nasty insects. So you're designed to level up to 2 pretty quickly after you're gathering those supplies, and then you delve into the lair itself, which is the level 2 dungeon. And again, look how amazing this is. And it literally, you can see the bones of the ancient green dragon here on the map, and it has this straight up zone of like poison cloud basically that the party has to deal with. So it has this extra like layer feature to make it even stronger. You can find the other elves here, which are all working for the green dragon. I love the token art for this freaking snake. It's just like popping out all kinds of... These snakes, by the way, are supposed to be in a pit. That's why it looks weird. There's a bunch of enemies here. So I would actually put these... You can kind of see the map art there. I would put these on the GM layer and hide them. And then if a player happens to fall in there... I don't even know if I would show the token. I would just start, attacking with all these creatures, basically. But there's a UNT Malison that is serves the green dragon, which the party can actually talk to if they haven't fought the dragon yet. Or if they do fight the dragon, they just pop in here and immediately fight it. Then the Malison comes in and helps attack, which that is a hell of a fight for level 2, by the way. I wrote that in my notes. Like, this is a straight-up green dragon wormling, which is already, I think, a CR2 creature. Yeah. And remember, Monster Manual creatures of 2024 edition are stronger. So not only do you get that, but they also have its own like special little zone here, which I'll look it up again. Let's see. This is on L6. So L6, the corpse chamber is a sickening miasma. A creature enters the miasma for the first turn, starts its turn there, must succeed a DC 12 con save or have the poisoned condition. Yeah, as if this thing's not poisoning you enough, basically. Hopefully you made those like anti-toxin, side quest thing, which I think is awesome that it's there. And then you have to fight this UNT Malison who can come in as an addition, which is also a pretty nasty, like, no-joke stat block. In fact, the Malison's actually a CR3 creature. It's actually technically more powerful than the Wormling. So, dang, that's pretty rough. But in a good way, I think that's a noticeable challenge for a party. And then it's got the twig blights and insects. It feels very thematic, right, to like Green Dragon, corruption and like evil nature stuff, basically. So I think that's just one of the better ones. Very simple, very straightforward. But in terms of a thematic dragon layer, I think that does an absolutely great job at giving me exactly what I'm looking for with a Green Dragon layer. I think even with a low level one, I think it does a lot of cool stuff. For another one I want to look at, let's do Forbidden Veil, because this one has a much different art style. This is the Red Dragon. And it is meant to certainly evoke like the class. I mean, the red dragon is the most iconic of the dragons. And this one has, art style and vibes that feel very much like an old school, like first edition hack and slash permadeath adventure module, which you're either very excited about as I'm telling you this, or you're like, no. I'm kind of somewhere in the middle because I think there is some really cool stuff here, and I appreciate that it has this kind of big overland travel section, but it gets real crazy with how many monsters are in this final area where I'm like, all right, seriously. And I love combat, obviously, but it is hilarious how much shit they throw at them. But in this setup, there's this vale, this whole forested region area that's being burned, that's actually burned regularly, kind of like a slash and burn by the Red Dragon, who is, I think this is the one that was actually set up by Githyanki refugees and the Red Dragon, and now it's a descendant of that dragon, I believe. It basically wakes up every like 200 years and just burns like everything as kind of a check on the power of this area, I guess. And there's different factions within this town, which unfortunately don't get a nice town map, but there is a whole bit where the party can be in this town and deal with these different factions, which also feels very old school, I feel like. And they even have like the traditionalist faction, the merchant faction. I feel like that's something older editions kind of gave you. Also was having different, one quest giver of a faction that you could kind of deal with, and you can get information that you should basically try to put the dragon to sleep, and to do that you need to collect all these different flowers that happen to be also in the dragon's huge multi-tiered ziggurat lair. So first you have this big overland travel section where you have to go through this whole area that's literally places of it on fire. They're going to this huge, like, wildfires are burning everywhere. You only occasionally even see the dragon doing its thing. It's more like the aftermath of the dragon, which I do like. Like, that's a cool way of showcasing the dragon's power. And there's all these different like scripted events. And I appreciate also that it's not a bunch of random encounters. It's actually like, hey, no, this happens at certain areas and certain intervals. There's a giant rock that comes down. For example, it's flying around and hunting, even despite these like terrible conditions. And then you finally make it to the mountain, and you make it to the Forbidden Vale, or I guess it's all considered Forbidden. Sorry, the what's it called? The Gardens of, I want to say Exhibit, but I don't think it's quite how you pronounce the name. And it's a huge 3-level, actually I guess it's 4 levels. It's 3 levels plus a basement of the Dragon's Lair, and it's this old like just magical cool ziggurat thing, steeped pyramid thing. And it's full of monsters. There's this elevator in the middle that players can just step in and move because it's like astral plane from it. There's different creatures the players can deal with. There's already a bunch of monsters here, and then also there's a Green Hag Coven on the 2nd level, and the Green Hag Coven has access to a Mirror of Life trapping, which has another like half dozen monsters inside. Like it's just hilarious how many monsters is in this adventure. But you can see the artwork. I believe this is the Dyson logo style. It's not one that I like, but I'm sure others would come up with pretty good artwork for this one, and you could use that. But this is the advantage. This is the disadvantage of having, different art styles. Some of them are going to look really great, and some of them are going to look like this. Sorry. But this one just is way more expansive and longer and has more stuff involved, even though the story isn't actually that much more involved than Death at Sunset, for example. And then another example we can look at, I guess, what's another good, let's look at, well, Baker's Doesn't has, ooh, that's another really good different style. So real quick, this one has to do with it's kind of a fairy tale, like Hansel and Gretel thing. This isn't actually the full map, it's this one. And it devolves into almost like a Willy Wonka candy factory. I actually really love this adventure, and I think it's fucking brilliant. But you can see the art style is very, very different and really outside the box when it comes to the different stuff that D&D can be, basically. But I actually adore this one. I think it's very cool and well done. It's got different plot things that throw at the players and twists and turns. And the dragon is just kind of like a MacGuffin, honestly. It's the gold dragon. It's kind of just did some mischievous thing that's on the run, happens to get captured by this other creature. So this is the one that I don't think is at all like a dragon's lair, to its benefit, though, because so many of them are just a dragon in a lair that the players have to go defeat. Almost all of them are like that, actually. So there's some that do some really different things that I appreciate. A more story-heavy one would be Well, Copper for a Song, definitely. And then Dragons of Najir, which is takes place in a monastery. And the players get shipwrecked here because there's a bronze dragon that's wrecking ships. And normally they're not, bad dragons, but this one's very protective of somebody, and that somebody happens to be on the run, and the dragon is very attached to that person, but doesn't know that they've been committing crimes. And so there's an interesting story development the players can build up on, and like the whole first level here basically is just exploration and role playing, and then the second level gets down to like confronting the actual person who has the dragon on their side. So partly you have to kind of convince the dragon that, hey, this person has actually done bad things. So I appreciate the way this story unfolds in this area. And plus, it's just a really cool map to be able to have these kind of different, exploration and sneaking around and different kind of think outside the box when it comes to just room to room fighting, basically, which is something I really appreciate. And something that I think this adventure or this whole module ultimately does a little bit too much of. A lot of them are just, hey, this is the dragon in the cave, and we got to go fight that dragon. This is an example of Before the Storm with really amazing map art that I absolutely love. Very, very colorful, very like almost like a comic book thing. But the dungeon, it's ultimately just like, hey, we got to go fight this dragon at its cave lair. But again, if you like that kind of thing, then it's awesome, and I think there's plenty of that in here. It does get repetitive, though, if you're like me and you're reading through every single one of these adventures, and you're like, okay, this is another, like, go fight the dragon in its lair thing. But again, that was kind of the whole premise, so that's basically the whole point of it. I do think that most of them do a good job of marrying the dragon to the appropriate, like, location or biome, or its what you think of that dragon, I guess, as being up to. So like the red dragon just rampaging around and causing fiery destruction feels very appropriate. The green dragon layering in this, big ancient tree and corrupting nature. There's a white dragon who's in a frozen cave with a bunch of ice statues and has like a freezing river and stuff. And the metallic dragons as well, like the bronze dragon at the island wrecking ships. There's a bronze dragon who can they're big on burrowing, so it's got this like half collapsed layer, and it can burrow through rocks and create its own like doorways and things. The blue dragon is in the desert, of course, and has this cool like ancient city in the desert where it can burrow on down to get to different areas. So most of them do a great job. There are a few that really made me go like, wait, that's kind of weird. This is actually one of them, the black dragon. Like granted, there's acid pools everywhere, which is great, but it's basically like the leader of a pirate gang, which I thought was very bizarre. Like black dragons are all about like the necromancy and the death and stuff, and this one has like almost nothing to do with undead things going on. And I was like, pirates, okay. And the gold dragon being like basically just a MacGuffin, so you don't really get any thematic of the gold. I didn't think gold dragons were like tricksters. Maybe I'm wrong. Like mischievous, silly dragons, and then the silver dragon, that one is such a weird one because I always thought the silver dragon was like the like stick up their butt like paladin of the dragon pantheon or whatever. And instead it's like being the one who's like being all like sneaky and mischievous and duplicitous and stuff, which I thought was very odd. But maybe all of you will have different opinions of the whole dragon thing. I think probably like 70% of them fit very well with their dragon types, and a few of them caused me to be like, that one doesn't seem to be entirely right. All right, let's actually wrap this up because again, I'm going to go to a further deep dive and do all my adventure rankings with my other video, which will go over all the adventures individually. But this one, for overall purposes, let's do my pros and cons and final thoughts of Dragon Delve. So, pros, I think the D&D 2024 character sheets and the tokens look awesome. And I want to highlight that because this is really the first time we're seeing that, and specifically the first time I'm seeing that in Roll20. And I think obviously I've seen the sheets before, but just seeing all of them plugged in, the NPC sheets plugged into the D&D 24 versions look very cool. And then the tokens look pretty dang awesome. In fact, if I can blow that up, I mean, snake warning, I guess, but that's the way it like curves all the way around the token is awesome. I love that. And even like this with the little like snout popping out, maybe I'm easily impressed, but I really like that. Pro, I thought that the options for tying the adventures together as a campaign are actually pretty decent. Now, they're not still amazing, but they're probably the best I've seen a adventure module do. So granted, that's a low bar, but I think especially that option 2, where it's like, hey, take this inciting incident from our very final adventure and then use that as the overarching thing that ties everything together, I think is awesome. I would again take that further, and I could make a whole video about how you should make that blue dragon be a main villain, and almost turn that, I don't know, somehow you could turn into like also working for the dragon page. I would probably combine options 1 and 2, honestly. Like have the brazen egg, and then have the person who gives you the brazen egg, ooh, there you go, Eldamir, actually be the patron of Bahamut or something, and have them be like, hey, this is your quest, and for some reason you're the chosen ones to go deal with all this dragon stuff, and it's ultimately to take out this very powerful ancient blue dragon threat. Pro, properly scaled battle maps for every adventure, and many that feature amazing, awesome artwork. So if you were thinking like, oh man, I hope we get 1 or 2 that are good maps, it's the opposite. You're only going to get 1 or 2 that are not great map styles, honestly. In fact, I think it's only Forbidden Vale and For Whom the Void Calls literally have that kind of black and white graph paper look. All the other ones feature some really cool map art that are full color and look just awesome in Roll20 for the most part. So that's 8 out of 10 is pretty dang good. And also all properly scaled. There's no big terrible shenanigans. The worst offender is this one, which is a 10-foot map. And it makes sense because it's supposed to be an ancient city where an ancient dragon can get around, so it needs to be big. You know, it's kind of like having, you know, giant layers. Also, they just kind of need to be larger to make sense. So this is the only one that's like you'll have to zoom in because it's subdivided grids. But even then, I think the map art itself looks amazing. And it looks like it makes sense why it's that big. It's very cavernous and this big kind of built into a desert mountain, I guess. Also, NPC tokens and sheets that are organized by module. So I pointed that out. If you look at the creatures, again, all the NPCs sheets organized in subfolders, which is really cool and something I want to highlight. If they start, I hope they start doing it. I don't need to highlight it every time, but I want to point it out certainly now that I appreciate having all of those organized in that way. All right, cons. These are mostly standard dragon layers with a few exceptions. And yes, there are some obviously different biomes and styles here. You know, there's the ancient tree, redwood, you know, hollowed out. That's a green dragon layer. There's this ancient city that's a blue dragon layer. So that they do some cool stuff in there, but ultimately these are all like dragons as bosses in their layers. And even the ones where you're not supposed to fight the dragon, like Copper for a Song, and For Whom the Void Calls are still basically dragon layers. It just happens to be that in fact, Copper for a Song is weird because the dragon is not even hostile. Like, you can go through the whole adventure and not fight a single thing. But other ones, you're kind of, the dragon is like irritated in some way, basically, and you have to like talk them down or explain the situation. Only a few of them really do a cool job of thinking outside the box when it comes to that, and they happen to be some of my favorites, which is like Baker's Doesn't, which is amazing, although the dragon is almost too incidental, and the Dragon of Najir, which does the island monastery thing, which is also a really cool, like, doesn't look like a dragon layer like whatsoever. So those ones I think are real highlights, but unfortunately also make the others look a little more. I understand that there should be some that are just basic dragon layers, like that's what we should get here. But I wish more of them did a little bit more, like maybe make one of the, because like the metallic dragons can all like, you know, shapeshift, for example, and like to pose as people. We don't get any of that here, for example. Like one of them could have been like an urban adventure where, I don't know, there's a silver dragon who's just a knight who's like relentlessly pursuing, you know, this villainous cult. And then it turns out at the end that maybe the cult is run by this really horrifying, like, powerful threat, but then your knight buddy like suddenly transforms into a silver dragon and like, all right, well, I gotta show my true form. Like that would have been, hire me, wizards. But that would have been a cool, like, you know, twist and an interesting way of using that kind of dragon that's not just another, you know, dragon in a cave layer thing going on. So I think we get a little too much of that. Oh, I didn't even talk about one of my cons. The solo rules are a super lame buff. So where was that? Using this book, maybe it was in a different section, but I do want to point this out. Running the adventures, maybe. Yeah, so, okay. I complained about this at the start of this video. Blessing of the Lone Champion. This is what happens if you run one of these adventures as a solo. hero. You're supposed to gain, you give your one player these abilities. So Heroic Inspiration, they gain inspiration whenever they finish a short or long rest and whenever they roll initiative. So at the start of every combat, you gain an inspiration, and after you short or long rest, you gain inspiration, which is almost redundant. Maybe not quite. But yeah, so you basically get inspiration at the start of all those different things, right? Fine. Okay, they get that. That seems fine. Temporary hit points. You get a number of temporary hit points equal to 10 times your level whenever you gain this blessing. So at the start of the campaign and when you gain a level. So you're gaining levels fairly quickly here in these adventures. And that scales real fast, real quick. 10 times per level. I don't know what that averages out to in terms of like, does that give you like a fighter's extra amount of hit dice? You know, if a fighter's got a D10, and let's say they've got at least a +2 or 3, so they're averaging out maybe 7 hit points a level. So that's actually more than that. What's a barbarian? Barbarian's a D12, you get 7. That's probably like a barbarian amount of, an average barbarian hit points per level on top of whatever you've got, because it's temporary hit points. So if you're level 3, that's 30 temporary hit points that you can start your adventuring day with. I say day, I mean, I technically you could long rest halfway through these adventures, but a lot of them, I don't know, maybe some of them you'd have to have a long rest at some point in between, but that's crazy to me. At level 8, that's 80 temporary hit points. I don't think that's very fun for either player or DM to deal with, right? Because I think about like, I don't know, man. It's I thought that was a bizarre way of balancing it, basically, because the worst way to balance any difficulty, whether I'm playing a video game or whatever, is to turn enemies into bullet sponges, right? They just gain more hit points. That's not more interesting. It just makes everything take longer. So I thought that was just a very poor way of balancing it out. I haven't tested that or anything, obviously, but to me, the better solution would have been to give the players the sidekicks, and then you can maybe scale up those sidekicks a bit if we need to. Give them hirelings and give them all personalities and give them like permadeath and stuff so the player cares about them. And let the player like kind of command this small, not maybe like 2 or 3 sidekicks or something, versus giving and maybe even still give them the inspiration thing every time. I think that's probably fine, but the temporary points is absolutely nuts. So yeah, that was a con for me. I was not impressed with the way it does that. I would love to hear your thoughts about that. And for any of you who have run solo adventures, if you feel like you've needed to give your players some extra boost, I will say as an advantage, what are some that give you? Baker's doesn't one of them. There are some that include like, hey, if you're running this as a solo player, here's the kind of stuff. Yeah, here it is. So it does give you recommendations for skills that players should have, but I mean, most of them are basically the same skills. Like, yeah, you should probably have some kind of charisma thing. You should either be very proficient in charisma or stealth, essentially, and just, I mean, most of these skills are useful for somebody to have. So you have to fight your way out of everything. But yeah, I wasn't terribly impressed with the Blessing of the Lone Champion. All right, and then con, some of the map art styles look better than others in a VTT, as I just showcased. I basically included this as pros and cons, which is the pro that most of the maps look great, and the con is that some of the maps don't look very good in Roll20. Final thoughts. While there are some fun layers and ideas, Dragon Delves ultimately plays it a bit too safe when it comes to dragons in dungeons. Thank you to everyone for watching this D&D review. You can watch more reviews and follow our own D&D adventures here on my YouTube channel. You can support my work at patreon.com/Rogue Watson. Shouts to Platinum Patrons, Joe, Will, Thomas, Brandon, Genocider, Roleplay Roll, Christopher, Big Nut, John, Nathan, Andrew, Stephanie, Jason, Lovey Spuds, Warden, Udemona, LLC, Tom, They're Eating the Dogs, Marcus, Snuggy, Hugo, Jerry, Shay, Sasha, and John. And Gold Patrons, RPG, Papercrafts, Pretty Boy, and Yuma, Does It Lounge, Jerome, Nathan, Pascal, Tortoise, Scott, Rufus, Jerry, Glenn, and Mark. Thank you all very much for your support.